Hello to all. Let's reset. There is no reality, but perceptions. Human beings perceive the world with at least 6 senses: smell, taste, touch, sight, hearing, and proprioception. Proprioception is the sense that allows us to perceive location, movement, and action of body parts. With it, we can feel the position of our joints, their movement and effort. With these perceptions, we construct a picture of the world, a model. It works like a map and gives us immediate information about the world when we evaluate. Other species of living beings also perceive the world and build models of their reality. In this way, the animals through the smell know which food is bad to eat. They also evaluate according to their models of the world. Other biological species may have other senses that we do not know, and even have more senses than we do. The sense of electroperception. The platypus perceives the field electric that leave their prey when activated, so it can easily find its prey. There are fish that can feel the electric fields, like sharks and rays. The sense of magnetoperception. Pigeons use magnetism to orient theirself. They use exactly the same system used by trout rainbow to orient theirself. The same with ants, bees, and others such as infrared sensors of the jewel beetle, which can detect a fire at 80 kilometers away without using its eyes or feeling their warmth. The horn of the narwhal, the unicorn of the seas, can detect salinity changes. In that way, they would have models of the world that we would not understand, and that, in addition, for the same reason, they would be useless to us. In the case of humans, we all perceive reality with our senses. Based on that, we build our model after exploring the territory of the world. The Elephant and the Blind Sages. It is an Indian fable about research. An ideal legend to reflect on how we don't have reality in our hands but only perceptions. In the fable, it is very useful to do that. Our researchers do not have all 5 senses, so let's say they are blind. And let's say it starts like this. One day a man, carrying an elephant, came to visit a farm cared for by 5 blind men, who were very curious. And he asked them the favor of leaving his elephant tied to a nearby tree. No problem, they replied. And then they asked very curiously, "But what is an elephant?" The visitor explained to them, but they did not understand a single word. Of course, those 5 men, blind to living in the countryside, knew many animals, but they had never heard of the mysterious elephant. That night, they went to investigate. The first touched the paws and said, "That elephant is like a huge tree." Intrigued, the second man approached, but touched the trunk. "A viper? Be careful. This animal is like a huge snake." It was the turn of the third man, who explored one of the elephant's ears. "Everyone is wrong," he said then. "The elephant is similar to a fan." Immediately, the fourth man approached the animal and touched one of its fangs. Incredible! This animal is quite a warrior. Possesses a huge spear. It's like a tube, somewhat curved. But the tip does not deny its spear-like nature. Finally, the fifth man came over to see why everyone said different things, and touching his belly, said, "This animal is very strong. It looks like a wall." The men were totally bewildered. How to connect all these observations? Were any of them right? They had been confronted with the real, but they were only left with some perceptions. Could they build a model of the elephant, close to reality? In the search for a faithful picture of the universe, explorers have plunged deep into the very fabric of reality. To know what the fundamental particles really are, a model called string theory has been obtained. This model says that the particles that make up everything are actually vibrations of very small objects, called strings or filaments. Those who investigate the reality of the very small have contributed about 5 string theories, which together are known as the M theory. Like the blind explorers of the Hindu fable, who had 5 versions of what an elephant was, modern researchers, each for their part, have perceived something different. The 5 versions of M theory that currently exist are: Type 1 string theory, where both open and closed strings and D-brands appear, moving over a 10-dimensional spacetime. The D-brands have 1, 5, and 9 spatial dimensions. It is the only one whose strings are not oriented. Both orientations of both orientations of a string are equivalent, and that, unlike the rest of superstring theories, contains not only closed strings, but also open strings. Type 2b string theory. It is chiral, meaning that it has a mirror image. Like an enantiomer, it preserves parity. Type 2a string theory, with 10-dimensional supersymmetry. Non-chiral, that is, it violates parity. Heterotic string theory, HO, includes closed strings, propagating in a flat spacetime of 9 spatial dimensions. All strings are steerable. Left-handed and right-hand particles, treated differently. Heterotic string theory, E, includes closed strings, propagating in a flat space of 9 spatial dimensions. All strings are steerable. For modern explorers, this M model is their elephant. 5 versions, to know what the phenomenon is really like. 5 versions to know what the world is made of. At the end, these 5 string theory researchers are as blind as those who explored the elephant. Do we lack senses to study reality? What do we need to see the complete elephant? Does our reality belong to another greater reality with more dimensions, and therefore, we are unable to perceive it? Reality can be greater than the observed, a hyperreality that we cannot see. What are we part of that we don't see? We are like the spider that stuck to our threads. We only perceive the outside world that interests us with our touch, and we assume that our sense is all the senses that exist, and we are waiting for our fly. But outside our web, there is a huge world that we do not perceive. The spider cannot formulate a model of the world more complete than it perceives with its means. He has to resort to imagination, to metaphysics. For lack of perceptions perhaps. Or because our 3-dimensional reality is mired in a greater 4-dimensional reality. We need guesses from 4D objects. You just have to dare to think differently. In the same way that explorers lacked a sense to understand the reality called elephant. Humans lack senses because there are things we cannot see, we cannot perceive, like dark matter, or fourth-dimensional space as it goes beyond our known reality. Either we lack senses to perceive, or our reality is contained within a greater one that we cannot see. Let's consider an interpretation, which is conjecture. A 4D object that lives in the fourth dimension moves, and when it passes through our 3D plane, it suddenly appears. And we say, this point was created out of nothing, which is an interpretation since we don't see the whole elephant. However, this 4D torus, when they intersect the 3D plane, in which we live, begins to manifest. First as a point or particle. Because, you have to know, that 4D shadows have volume in our plane. As you can see, the particle that appears is divided into two. And many interpret that a particle has created its antiparticle. But we see that it is the same object. And then, they say that these two particles communicate instantaneously at a distance. Such communications do not exist, because they are ends of the same object. See 4D object guess in my channel. Such is our quantum elephant. We don't have reality, only perceptions. Consider that there is some 4D object. Obviously, we cannot perceive them. But we would see them when it intersects our 3D plane. Maybe we'd even detect its mass. The 4D torus in the image rotates along its vertical cross-section, as can be seen in the image. But in the 3D plane, one end rotates clockwise and the other has reverse spin. What we would see, at the intersection with the plane of our 3D world, and the 4D torus would be a pair of particles, in which one particle would have a spin contrary to the other particle. And if we make one particle change its spin, the other would do it without wasting time. And those who look at the elephant would call it to this effect, spooky action at a distance. The two particles do not communicate, and this happens because it is a single object. Now, if the 4D torus does not intersect 3D space, we will not be able to see it. But sometimes, in a vacuum, a particle appears. It is as if a point appears out of nowhere. This happens because the end of the 4D torus intersects with our 3D plane, and we see that section. This circular section rotates perpendicular to the plane. The newly appeared particle has a spin on the W-axis that is typical of the 4D. Such axis is orthogonal to the 3-axis, x, y, z of our 3D plane. Of course, they are conjectures, inspired by our quantum elephant. And then, a particle appears, which seems to spawn its antiparticle, with opposite spin. What happens is, that the torus, or the closed string, is entering our 3D plane each time, and the points of intersection are separated more and more. It produces the illusion, in our world, that both particles are separating. When in reality it is that the 4D object crosses more and more our plane. And what about real-world facts? The same, or at least, something similar. Let's say, there are no facts, but only interpretations. Is the glass half full or half empty? Ambiguity is an undesirable feature in a model, as it allows for misinterpretation of the reality represented, and one may wonder, which interpretation is true? By discovering that others make interpretations different from his own, the subject discovers his radical and insurmountable contingency. And he warns that he cannot, consequently, demonstrate his vision to others without the help of the real. The painting depicts a woman. But does it show a young woman or an older woman? The painting is reality, and in it the young woman looks towards an undefined place, and the older one shows her profile, How can both interpretations be given? According to the results of a study conducted on the perception of this image, which appeared in the journal Nature, they tell us that whether one or another woman is seen before will depend on the age of the observer. People who are between 18 and 30 years old see the young woman first. Observers over the age of 30 see the old woman first. And this is so because the meaning of the world depends on our models built through life by joining our perceptions. It happens that the image gives us data and we complete it, because the mind always seeks a conclusion to interpret according to the known model, even if it leads us to a mistake. In an image, 3 points can be hinted at. The mind interprets the existence of a triangle. The mind fills with patches. This action of filling makes the perceived be interpreted in the best possible way. It's a gestalt, although it is very far from what happens in the world. In this image by M.C. Escher, the question arises, is the center square, the ceiling, or the floor? In fact, it can be interpreted as both. But it's not really ceiling or floor. Filling with patches is a matter of the gestalt of the brain. It is completed to understand. And that's why we say there are no facts, only interpretations. Consider the quantum elephant. Explorers have the phenomenon in front of them, but for some reason, they can't fully perceive it, only parts of it. The reality is one, but everyone perceives differently. It is as if each person sees the world with lenses of different color and texture. And the phenomenon of the quantum elephant was interpreted in 5 different ways with M-theory, 5 string theories, and scholars do not agree on what the elephant really looks like. And, currently, many people persist in handling erroneous models of reality. For example, denying that the Earth is spherical is the most extreme case of misinterpretation. Rejecting proven facts and believing falsehoods. We have known for more than 2 millennia that the Earth is round, thanks to studies by Eratosthenes. I'm not talking about people who still believe that our world is supported by 4 elephants, and that these, in turn, are carried by a flying turtle. Huge animal that travels through the skies, following, who knows, that mysterious paths through the stars. I mean, there are people who believe that the Earth is not a sphere flattened by the poles, but a disk. That the Earth is flat. It is not illiteracy. They studied the solar system and its planets in school, but in recent years, they have decided that all this sphere is a gigantic lie. How can it be that, in the 21st century, there are people who genuinely think that our planet is not spherical? The strength of human knowledge lies in the construction of its models of reality. That they are built little by little, from solid explorations, in which we can rely to continue advancing. A good map of the world will prevent us from getting lost. It's what will save us as a species. Because, ultimately, what we seek in the end is the truth. It is to know what this wonderful and unfathomable cosmos is really like. Well, this is it. Thank you very much for your attention.